Most stories about Olympic legacy sound the same. A city spends billions, the games happen, the cameras leave, and then, slowly or quickly depending on the climate and the finances, things start to fall apart. The pools go green, the stadium's empty, the village gets abandoned. It's a pattern so consistent that it has its own name. But there is one city that keeps getting held up as the exception, the place where the Olympics actually did what they were supposed to do. Barcelona, 1992. The games that changed a city and stayed changed. The question worth asking, 30 years later, is whether that story is as simple as it sounds. The opening ceremony of the 1992 Barcelona Olympics is remembered for one image above all others: an archer named Antonio Riballo, who was a Paralympic athlete, shooting a flaming arrow across the night sky to light the Olympic cauldron. He didn't actually hit it. The cauldron lit automatically, but the image of that arrow arcing through the darkness over the Montjuic Stadium became one of the defining moments in Olympic ceremony history. Barcelona had arrived, and it knew how to make an entrance. To understand what Barcelona 1992 achieved, you need to understand what Barcelona looked like before it. The city's waterfront was largely industrial and inaccessible, a working port backed by warehouses, rail lines, and the kind of infrastructure that keeps a port functioning but makes a city feel cut off from its own coastline. The Barceloneta neighborhood existed right next to the sea, but the beaches were polluted, and the waterfront was not the kind of place you went for leisure. The city had its back to the Mediterranean. The Olympics gave Barcelona the political will and the financial mechanism to do something the city had been discussing for decades: open up its waterfront. The Olympic Village was built on formerly industrial land near the sea, and when the athletes left, it became a residential neighborhood. The port was transformed into a marina. New beaches were created. The coastline that had been closed off from the city for generations became one of Barcelona's defining features. This is the part of the story that gets told most often, and it's true. The Olympic Village is perhaps the clearest example of what Barcelona got right. Instead of luxury apartments that sat empty or a complex that fell into disrepair, it became a genuine neighborhood, the Villa Olímpica, with residents, schools, shops, and the kind of street life that makes a place feel real. The buildings are still there. People still live in them. By the standard of every other Olympic village we've looked at in this series, that is a remarkable outcome. The main Olympic Stadium on Montjuic has a more complicated story. It was originally built in 1927 and renovated for the Games. After 1992, it became the home of Espanyol Football Club for several years, which gave it a consistent use that most Olympic stadiums never find. Espanyol eventually moved to a new purpose-built ground, and the Estadio Olímpic Luis Companies, as it's now called, hosts occasional events but sits largely quiet most of the year. It's maintained, it's beautiful, and it's mostly empty. Sound familiar? The infrastructure legacy goes well beyond the venues. Barcelona used the Olympics to accelerate a metro expansion that had been planned, but unfunded for years. Ring roads were built around the city to ease traffic. The airport was expanded. Telecommunications infrastructure was upgraded. These are the kinds of improvements that benefit a city for decades. Not because the Olympics happened, but because the Olympics created the political pressure and the funding mechanism to make them happen faster than they otherwise would have. Here's the part of the Barcelona story that gets left out of the legacy brochures. The Olympics put Barcelona on the global tourist map in a way that fundamentally and permanently changed the city. In 1990, Barcelona received around 1.5 million tourists per year. By 2019, that number had grown to over 20 million. The city that the world fell in love with in 1992 has spent the decades since struggling with the consequences of that love: overcrowded neighborhoods, rising rents, residents priced out of the areas where they grew up. Barcelona residents have been protesting against over-tourism for years. The Barceloneta neighborhood, the one right next to those beautiful new beaches, has seen its resident population decline dramatically as apartments converted to tourist rentals. The Gothic Quarter, which tourists come to experience as an authentic slice of Barcelona, has become so saturated with visitors that the authenticity they're seeking has largely relocated elsewhere. The Olympics didn't cause this directly, but they lit the fuse. The Palo Sant Jordi, the indoor arena designed by Japanese architect Arata Isozaki, is one of the genuine success stories. It became Barcelona's primary indoor venue for concerts and major events, hosting everyone from the Rolling Stones to the biggest names in sports. It works because it's the right size for the right city. Barcelona is large enough and internationally prominent enough to fill a 17,000-seat arena on a regular basis. Size matters. Fit matters. Barcelona understood this in ways that Polokwane and Manas did not. Why did Barcelona succeed where Athens, Rio, and so many others struggled? The honest answer involves several factors that were specific to Barcelona's situation and difficult to replicate elsewhere. The city already had world-class tourism infrastructure and international recognition. It needed the Olympics to accelerate development, not to create it from scratch. The venues were appropriately sized for a major European city. The political will to follow through on post-Games plans was genuine and sustained. And crucially, the Spanish economy in the early 1990s was growing, which meant the investment didn't come at the cost of essential services. There's a political dimension to Barcelona 1992 that's easy to overlook. The games were held in Catalan as well as Spanish and French. The opening ceremony featured Catalan cultural elements prominently. For many Catalans, 1992 was about more than athletics. That sense of purpose, the feeling that the event meant something beyond sport, may have contributed to the follow-through. The development that the Olympics triggered didn't stop in 1992. The transformation of the waterfront continued for years afterward, producing new districts like Diagonal Mar, that extended the logic of the Olympic Village further, along the coast. The 2004 Universal Forum of Cultures, another large event, was used to develop the northern end of the waterfront in a similar way. Barcelona essentially learned to use major events as urban planning tools, repeating the model that had worked in 1992. That's a very specific kind of institutional knowledge, and it's rarer than it should be. The rent increases that followed the Olympic transformation have been significant and sustained. Neighborhoods that were working class in 1992 are now among the most expensive in Spain. The families who lived in the areas redeveloped for the Games, some of whom were displaced to make way for construction, watched their city become more beautiful and more unaffordable simultaneously. This is the tension at the heart of the Barcelona story. The transformation was real, the benefits were real, and the costs were also real, and they were not distributed equally. The Sagrada Familia was already under construction in 1992. It had been since 1882. But the Olympic Games accelerated its completion by generating the tourism revenue that funds it. The basilica is paid for entirely by visitor tickets, and without the post-Olympic tourism boom, the timeline would have been very different. It's one of the stranger legacy effects of any Games. A sporting event helped finish a church that Gaudí started in the 19th century. Barcelona's story is full of these unexpected connections. The Barcelona model has been studied extensively by urban planners, city governments, and Olympic bidding committees around the world. It's held up as proof that hosting the Games can genuinely transform a city, rather than simply burdening it. The problem is that the conditions that made Barcelona work, the city's existing strengths, the political context, the economic moment, the scale of the venues relative to the city's size, are not easily replicated. Pointing to Barcelona and saying do what they did is a bit like pointing to a specific recipe and ignoring that you don't have half the ingredients. 30 years after the Games, the Barcelona waterfront is one of the most visited urban coastlines in Europe. On any summer evening, the promenade is full, tourists, locals, people eating at restaurants that didn't exist before 1992, walking past a marina that was industrial wasteland before 1992, looking at a skyline that includes buildings that were built because of 1992. The transformation is visible and real in a way that is genuinely unusual in the history of Olympic legacy. The map of Barcelona changed because of the Olympics. Not metaphorically, literally. New neighborhoods exist that didn't exist before. Coastline that was inaccessible is now public. Metro lines run where they didn't run. Roads connect parts of the city that were previously separated. These are permanent changes, built into the physical fabric of the place, that will outlast any stadium or swimming pool. That's what makes Barcelona different. The legacy wasn't just a building, it was the city itself. So is Barcelona the proof that Olympic legacy can work? Yes, with conditions. The conditions are a city that already has significant strengths to build on, venues sized appropriately for the city's actual needs, political will that survives beyond the closing ceremony, an economy that can absorb the investment without crisis, and a degree of luck with timing that no amount of planning can fully control. Barcelona had all of these things. Most cities that host the Olympics do not, which is why Barcelona keeps being cited as the example, and why the example keeps not being repeated. Barcelona 1992 is the answer people reach for when they want to believe that hosting the Olympics is worth it. And it might be, for the right city at the right moment, with the right plan and the right follow-through. The waterfront is real. The neighborhoods are real. The transformation is real. But so are the rising rents, the crowded streets, and the residents who were displaced to make way for a city that became too successful for some of the people who built it. Barcelona worked. Whether it worked for everyone is a question the city is still answering 30 years on.